It's hard to relate to a formless God. In India, they kind of figured this out and wrote it down further back than most other cultures, most other traditions or spiritual paths in other parts of the world. At least they wrote it down further back. Many areas, things were not written down, so we just don't have the information, the same kind of information. But they started thinking about God as being, formless or with form, and how these things play against each other or play towards one another. But the reason why most people throughout history have wanted a form for God or some kind of symbol, something that they could focus on, is that our entire world is made up of forms. Since we are born, we start to understand things by their name and what they look like. And it helps us focus, conceptualize, and memorize and make contact with that which is deeper through the exterior forms, through the symbols, meaning different things for different people, but also being intrinsic to ourselves because we observe them, take them in, and know them through form. The formless God, Nirguna Brahman, the attributeless Brahman, is thought of as the source for many Hindus, as the source being something that you can't say that it has a name or a form, but it is kind of like the canvas that every form is written upon, and that canvas is the source. But we understand the canvas, we make contact with, we internalize the canvas through what is painted upon the canvas. Saguna Brahman, Brahman with attributes. There's this term Ishvara. Ishvara is Saguna Brahman, Brahman with attributes, a god, a goddess with form. And Nirguna Brahman, it can't really be contacted, but it is understood as the underlying principle through which, from which everything comes, from which everything forms. It's interesting because while the form is necessary, the formless is always there. For instance, Kali and Her Yantra. On the edges of Her Yantra, where the petals are, and even the exterior square-like objects, that is her power, that is her expression. Many people who practice magic or spiritual practices, they might try to conjure up God's power, contact God's power, utilize God's power so that they can, gain money, they can gain lovers, so that they can get at an enemy, or even manifest peace or prosperity in their lives. You're accessing God's power, just like those petals and square-like objects on the edge of Kali's yantra. Yet, the closer you get to the center, the more intrinsic that is to Kali's being. Still Saguna Brahman with attributes, but more intrinsic, beyond just the powers, beyond just the expression. The downward-facing triangle, and especially the dot, is the core of Kali, and it becomes more simple. The yantra for Kali becomes more simple the closer you get to her, until you just see that point right at the center. That's where Kali is. To worship Kali, you can just draw a downward-facing triangle and a dot in the center, and you can worship Kali through that. Kali has been accessed through that downward-facing triangle and that dot for many thousands of years. The expressions on the exterior came later, as people started to understand God's power and God's expression. It became more intricate on the edges. And beyond the yantra, I was talking about Ishvara, Saguna Brahman with attributes. Ishvari is the kind of Shakta version of that, where you're contacting that God that is so many forms attached to this name, but just after the source, just after Nirguna Brahman. But Ishvari is the understanding that the reality of the source and the reality of God is feminine. There are many different religions and spiritual traditions. We get the idea that the source or God is masculine, but Ishvari is the counter to that God is intrinsically feminine, that this world is a womb, that this solar system's a womb, this galaxy's a womb, this universe is a womb, and the multiverse is another womb, and layers of wombs, turtles all the way down. As that old shaman's answer to what's below the turtle that carries the world, another turtle, and then another turtle. He's like, how many turtles? Somebody asked him, and he said it's just turtles all the way down. But it's kind of like wombs all the way around. But if we look at Kali's image, where she has a Trishula, which represents Tamaguna, Rajaguna, Sattvaguna, and also the spine, her Trishula trident. That's a very specific and very intricate form, just like all the skulls that she's wearing represent the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet, as well as the heads of demons or even the heads of devotees. And of course, standing upon Shiva, who is her consort, and Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is very much, Shakti is kind of like the warmth and the light of fire, whereas Shiva is the fire. You can't really imagine one without the other. The two sides of Saguna Brahman being kind of Shiva and Shakti for somebody who's very focused on southern India spirituality and shamanism, and more, I would say, ancient form of Hinduism rather than the Vedic, which came much later and has a lot of outside influence. But you'll find a lot of shamanistic cultures having that intrinsic, at least the other side of the coin is feminine, if not the whole coin itself, that is God, that is going back to the source. And Saguna Brahman. Anthropologists and scientists will often say, we give gods or spirits, things that we worship, things that we look up to, things that we connect with and believe in, that is the fabric of reality. We give them forms that we understand, because a humanoid form or a form from nature, because we've seen that, then we're idolizing that. It's actually reverse. So nature forms, and the human body formed from a deeper truth of God. Nature is a reflection of God rather than God being a reflection of nature, God or goddess. It's kind of reversed, and the anti-material, more spiritual understanding of it is that nature is an expansion. It is kind of on the exterior, kind of like the skin cells of God, and it formed in response to a deeper truth in God, and it formed the expression from a deeper truth. And nature was formed, bodies were formed, and the world we see around us is formed. Going back to the formless, when you ask somebody, how do you envision God? And there's this Abrahamic thing of not wanting to have God with form, because that's idolatry. That is worshiping a form rather than worshiping God. But how do you make a relationship with the formless? A lot of people will think of God as a void or a sky, or air, some kind of vast emptiness. But as soon as it gets color, as soon as it gets proximity, as soon as it gets a name, then that would be idolatry. So how do you, even if you close your eyes and you focus on God, or you close your eyes and pray to God, even a name like God is form. Or the color of darkness when you close your eyes, that is form, because it's attributes. It's Saguna Brahman. You can't really touch the formless. One thing that I like about Kali is that she has all these different depths to her. You can look at her yantra and see that the outside is very specific, has many lines and forms. The very center, that point, is where she is as the most powerful. Of course, you can also worship her as a statue, like I have. But there's so much variety to Kali. There's so much variety to Shakti, to what she is, that any kind of person can contact her. You can even imagine her as, once again, the void of closing your eyes and seeing just this empty blackness. You can even worship her as that, still form, but that is also Kali. So she can touch, and you can touch her through a myriad of different forms and understandings and names and experiences. Because every single experience that we have with God, what we think about God, whether it exists or doesn't exist, or mad at God, or happy with God, or worshiping God, bhakti, devotion yoga, devotion path. Any of these things, that is all tied to the experiences which become intricate to who you are, which become internalized. And there's all kinds of magic that you can also, I guess you can say, do or utilize Shakti, utilize Kali through. I usually think of magic as, so when we're born, we start learning what we can or can't do, what is proper in society, but also our physical limits. And through many lifetimes, life after life after life, we gather all of these impressions that inform us about how the world is. As soon as we're born, all these subtle impressions are still there. And all these lifetimes have covered spirit, have covered soul. In magic, I usually think of it as, whether you're making a sigil or some kind of mantra to do something, you're still contacting the edge of that yantra. You're still contacting the expression and the powers of God. But what you're doing in relation to your soul, there's like this life force sheath around the soul. You're removing those impressions in various shapes and forms, even words, even sounds. You're removing those impressions in the various ways to form something. So you're removing lifetimes of impressions in some kind of symbol upon your soul, cutting to the very life force sheath that's around the soul, and you're allowing it to shine forth like the edges of a yantra, to shine forth in the various ways that you want that life force, your life force, even touching that infinity, that you want to manifest in your world, that you want to manifest around you, and that you want to manifest into material or some kind of power in life, some kind of force in life. But you're removing those impressions. You might be called to do these things because of those former life impressions, or because of impressions that you have had from this life. But when you practice magic well, when you practice certain spiritual practices well to manifest something, if you're manifesting, I usually think of that as magic. But you're exposing that life force and even infinity in the forms that you wish, that kind of like a projector, when it's all light, but when you have certain like lines and forms that form a picture into this world, it's kind of like a projector projecting light, and only what you see is basically the lines of what has been carved into the film, the lines that you have carved upon that sheath, so that the inner light is projecting in a certain way, projecting into this world, manifesting into this world. It is interesting to think of magic in this way. It touches the power of God. It touches the deeper truth of manifestation. And the vast majority of magic is not done well. But if you do magic well, and magic is a very vague term, if you do magic well, it can bring manifestation into the world of material, allowing that inner light to project into the material in a way that you have wished, that you have willed into existence. But it's a strange relationship between magic and manifestation and soul. They are something that we kind of do by acting in this world, by working in this world. We kind of do that anyway. But it is a conscious willing and a more subtle willing as you're carving out those impressions in a form that you wish to come about. without an understanding of the subconscious, this would also be difficult, because the subconscious might call you to do this, but you're also carving your own consciousness. You know, wombs upon wombs. You're carving your own consciousness, willing your own consciousness around certain channels so that that inner light projects and manifests into very different behavior patterns and different attributes that your consciousness has, that your manifested being has. So psychology can be understood in this way, in becoming better people, becoming worse people, becoming different people. We can still understand that as various wombs and various sheaths, various layers that we're carving upon, so that the inner light is projected in a certain way, forming a different person. At any rate, I think I've gone on long enough. This has been a video about kind of a rant on form and formless God and magic, manifestation, Kali, Yantra, and some ancient Hindu ideas. I hope this has been interesting. If it has, if you like this video at all, hit that thumbs up down there. It really helps out the channel. Feel free to leave a comment. That also helps out the channel, and feel free to share this wherever you like. At any rate, thank you very much for watching, and hope all of you have a wonderful day.